Where's the rest of my panel, John Flismus? We don't pay you to walk off the stage in the middle of announcing
Introduce
the
your panel for you.
No, well, I mean,
I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Sorry. You see, it's not just you, Nikki. It's all of you.
Absolutely.
I don't know what you guys want.
Useless. You see, you wasted too
We'd
much time.
We'd like to welcome the phenomenal Sam Mkokeli, Ferial Haffajee, and Luke McKend to the stage.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Thank you.
Please, you're more than welcome. If there's anything I can do for you at any stage, Marianne is exhausted. She walked all the way up here. She did 4 stairs and sat over there. She's exhausted. There we go. If you need water, anything, just let me know.
Thank you very much.
Such a pleasure.
You make a lovely slide, you do. Good afternoon. Thank you to our fake news and media sustainability panel. We have some lovely guests here. I will introduce them to you. We have in the middle Ferial Haffajee, who is editor-in-chief, a sort of floating Uber editor of Huffington Post.
At large, no?
At large, editor at large as well, of Huffington Post, formerly of City Press and Mail and Guardian. Sam Kokeli, also editor and a journalist and part of SANEF's Media Freedom Subcommittee. And we have Luke McKend, who is the country manager for Google, a graduate of Fishhook. Lovely, you see his fresh face. There's no alcohol for sale at Fishhook. And then laterally of Stellenbosch. All of us are writing on very modernized digital panels. You can see the entire panel here is very 21st century. But fake news is not new. The only difference now is that, of course, we have a US president who communicates directly with the electorate, and of course he tweets fake news. Luckily, our own president is too busy to tweet fake news. We're helping him with that. But it's a very serious issue. Because the internet has, in a sense, amplified the possibility for fake news. In the apartheid days, I remember there were black ops campaigns against Busak and others, which was essentially fake news and placed in the media. But what's much more important here is the issue of sustainability. So I'm going to ask you each a round of questions, but just lead into it, particularly with you, Luke, because there was an article recently in the Wall Street Journal which pointed out that the 3 big tech companies, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, take 90% of all new digital advertising revenue and 20% of all ad revenue. Now, that's not, it's not good for us. It's so absurd, actually, that a Zimbabwean publisher recently chose to publish a fake news site in South Africa so that he could fund a real news site in Zimbabwe. That's what you're doing to us. So all of this means, in this amplified landscape, that things happen. You have been particularly targeted on Twitter, and there have been threats. It's been brutal, both virtual and in real life for other journalists. And I want to start by asking Ferial, and I will get to you, and I want you to hold that in mind, in the pot at the back of your head. You've been targeted, so what tactics were employed, first of all, in terms of people branding you as a fake news monger or belonging to white monopoly capital? And what could you do about it at the time? And did Twitter help when you complained?
Okay, sure. So with the benefit of hindsight, Marianne, we know exactly what happened now, who the farmers were, because you and your colleagues have gone and find out who registered the sites. We know that India was the epicenter of the Twitter bots. And we put together that, I think Praveen Goda, one of my colleagues here worked this out, faced 33,000 tweets and retweets in the course of that fake campaign. And to my mind, that really created fertile ground in which for him to be reshuffled without the furore that had greeted the reshuffle of the former finance minister, Nhlanhla Nene. And that all happened because social media had grown so phenomenally, because this campaign had been crafted, I believe, by Bell Pottinger and then localized and executed by people closer to the Gupta network. So you ask how I got in the middle of it. I wrote a first story long ago on state capture, just outlining the whole year. And almost the next day, I found these really ugly tweets about me. And they were fairly typically patriarchal ones of me as a bitch, literally a dog nursing puppies, as a stripper, as a cheerleader, and as a cow. Now, you can't get more stereotypical than those. And for the longest time, I hid them away because actually they did their work. I was deeply ashamed of them. and I would phone family who I didn't think understood Twitter and say to them, hey, that's not really me, you know. And then only when I wrote about this and realized that this is a contemporary form of media harassment.
So what did you
and
think
oppression,
it was initially? Some
I
sort
thought
of
it was like
amateurish attack?
you have to take what you give it, so you take it. Eh? And only now do I realize, when looking around the world, at the Philippines, at the US, here, that this is the new battleground for media freedom.
And at the time, what could you do about it? Once you realized that this was an orchestrated campaign paid for by a company, and other companies subcontracted by it as well, was Twitter able to help? Because we have in the audience, I think, some people
The thing is, you can do nothing about it. So on Tuesday, a number of us, led by SANEF, is back in court against the BLF because they're in violation of their contempt of court finding. I found with Twitter, I've literally reported hundreds and hundreds of these fake accounts. And maybe twice they get taken down, but they're like amoeba and they come back up. And I thought that Twitter's been quite poor, very poor, in fact, at understanding that it's being used to host a massive propaganda campaign that's shifted a country on its axis. It's very poor. I must say, when Barry Bateman of EWN reported Google ads that were part of the same campaign, took them down very quickly. So that was pretty cool. Huh?
We have a member of the audience whose daughter's photograph was used for a fake account, and when they threatened them with copyright violation, then Twitter took it down. So the legal threat was more important than all the other threats, all the other sort of reports. Sam, the attacks on media and journalists, we had Andile and the BLF here earlier, courtesy of Mr. Molefe. It's a huge challenge for SANEF as an individual organization and as an industry as a whole. SANEF is a body that is assigned to drive and be at the forefront of pushing back. But you struggle for funding, and we're dealing with people who are siphoning off our funds in turn and attacking journalists. What has been your role, and what do you think needs to change in relation to SANEF and how it is supported or can assist the industry and journalists in this new milieu?
The Andile Mngxitama phenomena is something that's quite easy to write off and you dismiss as a crazy guy out there, a hooligan who should be ignored. And there is quite a strong view within the media industry that we should be ignoring him. And I personally disagree with that. Fortunately, the organization I represent also shares that view that there is a problem. We're not just looking at Andile Mngxitama, we're looking at a proxy for the Gupta family. The story published by Daily Maverick a few minutes ago proves that already. By the virtue of the ownership of the car and association with the Brian Molefe and back to the Gupta family. He went to Peter Bruce's home with the people who followed him around to complain, to harass, intimidate him after he wrote a string of columns criticizing the Gupta family and explaining the impact that has. So it's not an easy thing to do to dismiss him as just being Andile. When you look at it as well, it fits in with a pattern where journalists are being increasingly intimidated. I, fortunately, am still lucky to enjoy freedom as a South African journalist. I'm really proud and also scared of the responsibility I have to live in a free society where I am given the space to do my job, to help develop this great nation, to take this great nation back to its values and the principles and the dream of a great South Africa. What Andile Mngxitama is trying to do is to take me, Ferial, and a few others away from that. They want to make us scared. They want to silence us. They want to stop us writing about state capture. As I talk to you today, there are a number of editors who can't just step out of their homes without worrying who is outside their homes. They need bodyguards 24/7. Fortunately, they still see themselves as people who are free, who have a duty to carry on fighting a very, very important fight. As SANEF, we see freedom, and it's not just a nice to have for the intellectual circles in South Africa to enjoy, for the people who work in these spaces and the people who read and consume the media. It is a public tool. It is there for the public to make sure that the public has the right to know, and it's not just an academic thing. This is the space that Andile Mngxitama is playing in. So it is quite important for us as SANEF and the media sector at large to be fighting this. But most importantly, it's for the public to realize that this thing is not just about the media. As you saw today, when they came out here, the attack is not really meant for us as journalists and for us alone. It's meant for good South Africans who want to gather like we're doing here today. It's meant to disrupt that. It's meant to silence civil society. It's meant to silence politicians. I stood next to Jackson Mthembu as he got off his car this morning. Andile Mngxitama was outside and he was shouting at him, telling him not to vote Jacob Zuma out on Tuesday next week. So you can tell the interference is not just about us and the media and us alone. It is about a bigger issue.
And SANEF, just talk us through the structure of SANEF, the funding of SANEF, and the power SANEF has, in a sense, to defend those freedoms, and then the individual journalists who are targeted. We see with Suna Venter, strangely enough, many of us were completely shocked afterwards. We hadn't sort of absorbed that she'd been kidnapped, tied to a tree, intimidated, and had the grass burnt. I mean, somehow, that got lost in this deluge we have. So SANEF's role is very important. How many editors belong to SANEF, and how does it function?
Look, we're very lucky as SANEF in the sense that we are a very small organization that has a very, very big responsibility. We're an industry association to which journalists, senior journalists and editors can belong. We are about media freedom, about protecting media freedom, or we campaign for that, and we look at threats to media freedom coming from the legislative framework. People here were talking earlier about the very, very bad idea coming from the ANC, and that refuses to die, of a media appeals tribunal. The legislative framework often throws at us a number of threats that are really making our lives are difficult and, as journalists. There are other threats to the media space, and some of them come from the media industry itself. As SANEF, we partnered with Wits University last year to do a study on the inappropriate interference of the commercial arm of newspapers and news operations in the sacrosanct editorial space. The outcomes were shocking. They were really chilling examples of managers who interfered. You may remember when we were all crying after the death of the great icon of ours, Nelson Mandela. The Cape Times wasn't crying with us, and they were busy trying to fire their editor, flouting our labor laws and the spirit of a free media. So this is one of the examples that came out of that study. And when you look at it, it's something that comes from the media business itself. There are many other examples of inappropriate interference by managers in newsrooms and trying to tell journalists and editors what news calls to make.
Okay.
The other concern that came up was the high turnover of editors. It does have a problem. It poses a threat to the things that we're trying to do. Somebody mentioned earlier here the resignation of Songezo Zibi at Business Day. It was one of the issues that prompted us as SANEF to see that we need to do this study. So this is the space we play in. We remain a small NGO that really struggles to raise funds, to operate, to make sure that South Africans do enjoy media freedom. And not just for us as journalists who are paid as professionals, but to make sure that South Africans do enjoy this.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Luke, so all AdWords display network business that Google does in South Africa falls under you, I take it. Okay.
Yeah.
Google doesn't disclose what your numbers are, but we kind of estimate it's around 5 billion. Not yes or no, or
How many?
5 billion.
Rand.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I see. We can talk in dollars. I mean, so, yes. So, but you don't have to. You can just nod or keep quiet. Or these are the estimates. Most of the sites that sell ads on their pages plug into the Google Display Network because it's like the biggest, and you can also just generate revenue through that traffic. However, this revenue is less than you would get if you could sell it, directly to your clients, which is what we used to do in the old days. And of course, the ads on the sites, as we've all seen, can turn very dodgy very quickly. Suddenly, you've got Johan Rupert on a Daily Maverick site, and you're wondering what's happening as the BLF arrives through the fiber network. So fake news spreads faster than and generates more digital revenue than real news. And Google is enabling this through display networks. So, what are you doing at Google to combat this? Because this is clearly an international problem. Take it away.
Well, I think first of all, we just need to interrogate a little bit the assumption about how much money is actually made through fake news or sites that misrepresent themselves. And in actual fact, in South Africa, it would be a pittance, would be a tiny amount of money. That being said, I think Google's role here is incredibly important. You know, our original mission is to index the world's information and make it universally accessible to everyone. And now, if what that means is, whether through ads or through some of the content that we display, through some of our search results, that those results are in fact either inaccurate or misleading or misrepresent themselves in any way, we're going to be doing a disservice to our users one way or another, and people won't use us. So it's deeply in our interest to make sure that whatever part of our business, whether it's search, you know, where people are really looking for information right now that's accurate, that will help them at that point in time, or even if it's a display ad, which presumably is designed to actually present a service or a product in a way that you might want to buy it. If that's a really terrible experience for the user, that's not something that's great for Google, and it's not great for the business that advertises for us, and it's not great for the publisher either. So our role is incredibly important to make sure that that ecosystem works well together. If it doesn't work well together, the whole thing tends to fall apart.
Well, I mean, it's good to hear that. The whole thing falls apart, but there is globally, as you saw in that clip when we started it, the consequences of Google, as we, you know, it's the same as Microsoft in the 90s in terms of being a platform for newsrooms to be able to sustain themselves. I mean, Google has been a very big part in our sense, whittling away that ability. What is your feeling around this, you know, supporting the sustainability of media itself financially?
So there's a lot of things that Google are doing around sustainability at the moment, and I think, you know, on the one hand, simply giving money to publishers is probably not a good thing. You know, we'd probably be having a discussion in a year's time about the fact that Google is influencing the news by funding the newsmakers, and that's probably not a good thing. So what we do is we're deeply involved in providing platforms that enable newsmakers and publishers to monetize the assets that they do have, which you've already mentioned. So we do that through a product called AdSense, which basically enables publishers to serve ads on their website from advertisers who'd like to reach a particular type of audience. A lot of that happens through technology, and we provide the technology and the platform that enables the publisher and the advertiser to make that match and hopefully provide a service that is useful to both. And that's the core of the monetization angle for what we do with publishers. But I think there's another angle there as well, which cuts more to the core of how do we address some of the fake news issues. And some of that is really, we think about making sure that the right skills are in place across the whole journalism industry. So we've announced recently, for instance, a project where we're aiming to train 6,000 journalists across Africa excuse me, in how to use data, how to present data, how to report on mobile in particular, so that you're presenting those facts in the best possible way and in a way that your audience will relate to them in a better way. So there's lots from training all the way through to monetization that we think contributes to the sustainability of the news industry in a fairly fundamental way.
The Wall Street Journal also, that particular article, which is one it's a discussion about the fourth economy, or in terms of bots and cars that are going to be driven, where we won't need, people to work anymore. I mean, this technology has decimated, or the internet in many ways, and Google has decimated the creative industries in many ways. Music, or we've had to find new models. Music, journalism, and all the creative arts have taken a hell of a knock in terms of sustainability. Is there a different model where Google doesn't get the lion's share of what it is? How do we